It is an absolutely worrying yet little-known fact that personal injuries caused by cattle are on the dramatic increase. Between 2000 and 2024, cattle and bulls were responsible for the deaths and injuries of countless people, making them the deadliest animals in America. These fatalities often involve a bull attack, but attacks by cows are also surprisingly common. Those most frequent victims are when cattle attack a farmer or people working with or near cattle. Members of the public are also at risk, with dog walkers seemingly in greater peril. The frequent presence of cattle grazing around public footpaths and ramblers' haunts make them a present danger to anyone who gets too close. Despite their image as lazy, lumbering creatures, the average cow can run at 17 miles per hour compared to the average human, who can only manage 12 miles an hour. Cattle and bulls are considered dangerous animals, and their owners can be strictly liable for injuries for any attacks by their cattle if certain conditions are met. If a farmer's cattle are grazing near a public footpath, a farmer has a duty to make any walkers aware of any known dangers which may be posed to them by the livestock. This can be done through signs or other warnings alerting any walkers to the dangers of cattle and other dangerous animals. Walkers are entitled to be able to use public footpaths, and the footpaths should not be restricted in such a way that they can no longer be accessed by the public. Farmers and ranchers should be aware of the dangers cattle can pose, and so should keep their public liability insurance up to date. Most farmers are responsible and will have appropriate insurance in place to cover them in the event that one of their cows or bulls attacks a member of the public. And those who own, operate, manage, control, and allow dangerous animals to exist in dangerous situations after repeated notice of prior attacks to safeguard people shall be held strictly liable for the known dangers of allowing bulls to graze freely near people in a public park. All of these cases are predicated on the legal concept of strict liability. And in this new Insider exclusive Justice in America Network TV special, our investigating team is on location in San Francisco with Walter Skip Walker, managing partner at Walker Hamilton Kearns, Clarissa Kearns, partner, and Jeffrey Walker, partner, and some of their clients who they successfully represented in some of the most recent cases involving dangerous cow and bull attacks. One of their cases featured in this new Network TV special took place on the trail in Round Valley Regional Preserve of the East Valley Regional Park District. The Park District, with 96,000 acres spread over 65 sites in the valleys and hills east of Oakland, is the largest urban park system in the country. But it is also home to about 10,000 freely grazing cattle, both to generate state revenues and suppress wildfires. But cattle and hikers are known to collide in the park, resulting in multiple serious injury-producing events each year. Walker, Hamilton, and Kearns have earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as some of the best trial lawyers in the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area and throughout California. They've built a substantial reputation by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down, because they believe to their core that someone who has been harmed is someone who should be helped. They have earned reputations as unyielding trial lawyers who repeatedly represent individuals and families and repeatedly win. This is the Insider exclusive, live from San Francisco. It is my great pleasure to introduce Skip Walker and Jeff Walker to the show. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm.
Well, we're a trial firm in San Francisco. I founded the firm in 1980. Up to that point, I had done various other aspects of law, but what I really wanted to be was a trial lawyer. Actually, I became a trial lawyer in 1980 and founded the firm in 1988. And we specialize in catastrophic injuries and wrongful death cases. We tend to be reliant on other attorneys to refer us cases, which happens in about 2/3 of the work that we have. typically the other lawyers will have been working on a case, found that it's not going to be resolved and is actually going to go to trial, and we're one of the firms that gets called upon to replace them and do the actual trial work.
Right. It takes a special talent to get in front of an audience, a jury, 12 people.
Well, it does take talent, but it also takes desire. This is something that all of us attorneys in this firm want to do, and that's why we present ourselves as a trial firm. We don't necessarily specialize in any particular area of catastrophic injuries. What we specialize in is presenting the cases at trial.
And today we are here because your firm has evolved into a certain niche for some of your cases, the bovine cases, correct?
Well, it has, yes, and that's kind of typical of the way things go with a trial firm like ours.
Yeah, and explain, what do we mean by bovine cases? Why are there even cases to begin with?
Well, we have represented a number of clients who have been injured by cows, bulls, and right now we have a client who was injured by a bison on Catalina Island. One thing kind of led to another, but as you said, it evolved. We were called in on a case that was going to trial, in which it was basically a he said, she said situation. The question was, did our client walk into a corral where a mother cow was there with her calves on her own, or was she led in by the people at the ranch where she was buying feed for her horses? The people who had the ranch said, oh no, she went in on her own. And our client said, that isn't what happened at all. Mm-hmm. And we believed our client. The defense insisted on believing its people. And the case went to trial with us establishing why it was that it was more likely than not that our client was telling the truth than the defense was.
And the case name was what on this?
That was Pereira versus Azevedo. And Azevedo is the name of the farm or the ranch where our client was purchasing the feed for her horses, and they had a mother cow and calves in a corral right near the feed store. What we managed to do in that case was to establish in front of the jury that the woman who denied that she had led our client into the corral had gotten as far as the calves themselves, where she was tickling the calves when the mother cow attacked our client. And what we said was, well, wait a minute, how is it that you got as far as the calves? Either you walked in first and our client followed you, or our client walked in and you passed our client to get to the calves. And therefore, you had to have been in the corral at the same time as our client. And you did nothing to keep our client out or to keep the cow away from our client. And that mother cow saw our client, rammed into her with her head, drove her into a post, and fractured virtually every one of her ribs.
Wow. Jeff, in these kinds of cases, what does the defense usually put up as an argument?
In the case that Skip was just describing, it was a strategy of trying to say that it was the client's fault, that anybody who encounters a cow, especially one that's in a corral, has asked to possibly be injured by that cow.
Has asked to be injured by the cow?
Has assumed the risk is the legal term, but is basically saying, if you come that close to a cow, then you're assuming the risk that the cow will injure you. Mm-hmm. And that does carry over to some of our other bovine cases. The other cases that we've handled tend to happen in open spaces at parks, in regional parks, or other open spaces. And in those cases, the defense tends to argue, hey, we were just letting our cattle graze here. We have no control over them. And there's also a concept called recreational immunity in California, which basically says if you open up your land to the general public, you cannot be held liable for the natural features of that land that might cause injury. The idea being that's why people go out into parks, is to see nature and to experience nature.
Right. What I was surprised to read was that in the area of Oakland, it has one of the largest, I think the largest public park areas, 98,000 acres or something like that. So let's get back to the ranchers that are allowing their cattle to feed on the grass. Why did that come about anyway? Isn't that some sort of an arrangement with the landowners because they would like to cut down the fire hazards, so they allow the cows and the bulls to go in and graze on the land?
There are multiple reasons that are given for why the cattle are allowed to graze in these areas, where they're also inviting people to wander the trails and enjoy nature.
Hikers and runners, right?
Absolutely. Families, from families to elite athletes, lots of people enjoy these trails. One of their main defenses that is raised in these situations is, well, we need the cattle to graze on the grass so that they're not fire hazards. And this day and age in this part of California, reducing a fire risk is a big deal and something that's very important. But it also happens that these regional park areas have some of the best grass, and they've also got very cheap or relatively inexpensive leasing agreements that the ranchers can take advantage of.
And they lease them from who?
That comes from the park district themselves.
Which is a state agency?
It's a county agency.
Okay, and let's talk about insurance. Obviously, these cases are ongoing, right? Somebody foresaw that somebody might get hurt, with this kind of arrangement. What type of insurance do the ranchers have? Does the state have? Can you sue the state?
We start with a philosophy that if somebody is going to engage in an activity, it is that person's responsibility to eliminate danger to other people as a result of that activity.
What about the exclusions?
Well, the exclusions are something that our partner, Clarissa Kearns, has devoted herself to in terms of finding ways to establish that they don't actually apply. For example, recreational immunity is supposed to be for private landowners. It's to encourage private landowners to open up their lands to allow people to recreate on them, so they're immune from liability if somebody, say, trips over a root or a rock and gets hurt. But what we're finding is that these public districts that sell the rights to farmers to graze their cattle, that they are not subject to recreational immunity. And what we're saying is, landowners, whoever you are, whether you're a county or a private party, you know that these cows come onto the land, and here's the most important thing. Cows, bulls, steers are inherently unpredictable.
And dangerous.
That makes them dangerous because they're unpredictable. And for each of these cases we have, something has occurred where our client wasn't doing anything other than what she or he was supposed to be doing, say walking along a trail when they were attacked. In one instance, we had a case in which bulls were let out along with the cows to graze. And then when they went to round up the bulls, they couldn't find one particular bull. And they said, well, that's all right, the bull will turn up sooner or later. Well, 6 weeks later, it did turn up, running over one of our clients and seriously injuring her.
The children's books focus on cows a lot. I've been reading a lot of children's books recently, and there's always a cow featured in there. And it's always a smiling, cartoonish cow. And for those of us who didn't grow up on a farm, the image in our head is that they're these cuddly, friendly animals. But they are inherently unpredictable. And on top of that, they're the size of a small car. So when you get something that's unpredictable and 1,500 pounds against a human, injuries happen.
And let me add one other thing, because I was surprised to learn this. A cow, especially a mad cow, right, can run 17 miles an hour on an average. A human being can only run 12 miles an hour. If you do the math, there's a problem for you.
There most certainly is. And we've even had one case where our clients stopped by the side of a path to have a snack. They were just picnicking, and it was a family, and some cows wandered over to see what was going on. And our clients saw these large animals approaching, and they panicked, and they grabbed their baby and they took off and started to run. And one of our clients stepped into a pothole and broke his ankle while carrying the baby. But that was an instance where there wasn't actual contact between the cow and our client, and yet the cows appeared to be moving so fast they presented, given their size, a great threat that caused our clients to run.
Causation. Right?
Yes, indeed.
What I want to ask you is something about the legal strategies that you utilize to win your cases. Do a lot of them settle? Do you have to go to trial? What?
Well, that first case that I told you essentially started off as a he said, she said case, went to trial, and we ended up getting a verdict that was 25 times the offer that had been made in that case. But we learned an awful lot about bovine behavior in that case, and because we got such a magnificent verdict, other people began contacting us and said, hey, we've got a situation in which our client was hurt by a cow or hurt by a bull, and so we began taking them on one at a time, all because of a case that we started with a different concept as to who was telling the truth, and turned into one in which we became experts in bovine behavior, and we had experts who could testify as to bovine behavior.
And it would seem to me that the very first question you would ask is this public land or private land?
That's not the very first question. Very first question we ask our clients is, how did this happen? We want to make sure that they weren't doing anything that invoked the anger of the cow or made the cow go after them. But for example, we had one case in which a woman who was an ultra-marathon runner was using a public park trail, and she walked by a cow that was just off to the side of the trail, and the next thing she knew, the cow was ramming her from behind. She came to find out later, we came to find out, that cow had just given birth to a calf that was in the long grass that couldn't be seen. So what was supposed to have been done there? Our client was not responsible in any way, shape, or form. Who was? The owner of the cow, we said, and the people who allowed the cow to be on this public land where people were encouraged to be recreating. And don't forget, a lot of these parks are designed to get people out of the city or out of the suburbs and out into nature, appreciating nature. And they go out without a thought that this is dangerous. And a little sign with a happy smiling cow on the gate is not going to make them think, oh, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be bringing my family here. I shouldn't be bringing my kids here. And as far as the owners of the land and the cattle are concerned, they don't want anybody to know that it's dangerous. What they think is, just let's live and let live here. You know, let the cows eat the grass and let the people do the running, and let's hope for the best. And we're trying to put an end to that.
What kind of changes have you seen done with the ranchers, with the signs, et cetera, as a result of these cases?
One of the things we've seen is improved signs. Another is...
Do they have a mean-looking cow or what?
They certainly should, but they have to do something to convey the idea that cows can be dangerous and cows unpredictable, and are unpredictable, and you need to stay away from them. One of the other things that has been happening is with one of the park districts is they're actually separating the cows, the cattle, from the recreational users.
With fences or what?
They haven't actually put up fences, but they've moved the animals to different parts of the park than those that are normally used and by the recreational people. They moved them away from the paths. And my partner, Clarissa, will talk to you more about some of the things that have been done, in large part because of the work she's done.
What is the strict liability in California in regard to dangerous animals?
So there are two forms of strict liability regarding dangerous animals. The first is...
Explain for our audience what that means, strict liability.
Strict liability is a legal concept that says if you engage in certain activities, it doesn't matter how careful you are, it doesn't matter how many precautions you take, if your engagement with a certain activity injures somebody else, you are liable. You are strictly liable. And there are a couple of forms of animal strict liability in California, most famously dog bites, but we're not talking about dog bites today. For animals other than dogs, it's broken up into two categories. There's domesticated animals and wild animals. So if if you are harboring a wild animal, then you are strictly liable for any damage that that causes.
Is a bull a wild animal?
No, so the bovines, cows, and bulls are considered domesticated animals. And so strict liability can apply, but only in the situation where the owner of that animal knew or reasonably should have known that that animal had what they call a dangerous propensity. And not the whole breed of animal in general, but that specific animal was actually known to the owner to have dangerous propensities.
I can bet you that ranchers have lobbyists up in Sacramento right now, and they're lobbying to change the laws, right?
I think you're right. And, they come in feeling that they've God on their side, that what they're doing is they're controlling the undergrowth so that it's not a fire hazard. And by golly, we need these animals getting as fat as can be to feed the people of America. But like anybody else, they're self-serving in their arguments.
May I make a suggestion? The Getty Museum down in Los Angeles every year brings in sheep to eat the grass around, the Getty Museum. Why not sheep?
That's one of the things we have suggested, sheep and goats. Goats will eat anything, but we absolutely have suggested that if you have to have grass and undergrowth control, there are other animals besides 1,200 to 2,000 pound cows and bulls that you could be putting out there so as to lower the danger to the public.
One final question. Because of the nature of these cases where you have successfully settled and won some of these cases, when people call you up and said, I was attacked by a cow, a bull, whatever, how do you end up selecting your clients?
Well, the first thing we want to know is how the event occurred. The second thing is, what happened to you? What have you been injured? In what way have you been injured? And what kind of hospitalization have you undergone? Or what kind of doctor's treatments? Or how long has this been and how are you feeling now? The next thing we want to know is, how did the cows happen to be there in the first place? And in most of the cases that we have, well, in all the cases that we've had so far, it's followed a pattern of the cattle owner working with the landowner, which is most often a public entity, and entering into a contractual agreement by which both benefit. There is a payment by the cattle owner to the landowner for use of the land, and there is benefit to the landowner. Not only are they getting some money, but they're getting this fire reduction. So we're saying, okay, you've taken care of yourselves, to two parties to the contract, but are there other people that are affected by this arrangement? And it's something that they don't seem to consider. One of our jobs is to make them consider.
We have with us today one of your clients, a couple of your clients. One of them is Robin Eels, and one of your partners, Clarissa, who is going to come on the show right now. So let's bring her on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Robin Eels and Clarissa Kearns. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clarissa, tell us what happened in Robin's case.
Robin had been to the East Bay Regional Park District just one time previously with a good friend of hers and had enjoyed it so much that she decided to return on the day of the incident. She was going to go with the same friend. The same friend had to cancel at the last minute, but she had enjoyed being out of doors previously that she decided to go by herself. And she did. She started off on the same trail that she had been on just the day before.
Hiking, right?
Yes.
She had decided to go left this time instead of right to see a new area of the park. And the hike started out uneventfully, normally. She happened to see a cow that was interesting to her, a white cow she had never before seen, and took some photos of it and continued on up the trail. When suddenly, from behind, she was struck by something, she didn't know what, and she felt more pain than she had ever felt in her life, starting from the back, the pelvic area, and then it radiated up to her neck.
So were you thrown in the air?
I believe 1 minute I'm hiking, and the next minute, I can't tell you what happened. There was seemed to be no gravity. and everything was white. What it was is I was up in the air looking up, and then I saw trees going like this in front of me, and no memory until a little bit later when I saw hooves.
And what was the injuries that you suffered?
Broken coccyx. My spine broke in 2 places. I'm left-handed, and the bone right here broke all the way through, amongst a lot of nerve damage and other damage.
And you're still kind of in recovery, right?
It would be nice to think that, because I'm not really satisfied with how recovered I am so far. I can't really hike much anymore. I can get on my bike. Walking hurts after a little bit too. Sitting hurts after a little bit, after all these years.
Right. And Clarissa, when this case came to you, what were your first thoughts, and why'd you take the case on, and how did you pursue it?
Well, one of my first thoughts was, how could this have happened? She was simply on a hike in a park, and she had no idea that there were intact bulls. It would turn out later that when she was able to open up her eyes and she saw the hooves standing near her, that it was apparent that it was not a cow, but in fact an intact bull standing next to her. And she had no idea that intact bulls were allowed in this park to roam freely during breeding season. So one of my first questions was, how could this have happened? How was she unaware? And why didn't she know more before she set off on what she thought would be another beautiful hike?
Okay. Was this your first bovine case?
No. In fact, it was my second at the time. Interestingly enough, we've had another client who was injured in the same park a couple of years before Robin. She too set off on a run that day, and she was returning to her car. She could in fact see the car at the time she was struck and injured from behind by a cow. And we would later learn that the cow was pregnant at the time. But because the rancher allowed that pregnant cow to roam freely and give birth or drop a calf, as we came to learn, anywhere it wanted, and kept no record of this. We didn't know if the cow had just given birth or was about to give birth or what exactly, but all we do know is that the cow came up from behind and injured that person too. So same park, 2 different incidents, both bovine attacks.
Now, this can also be construed as a he said, she said type of case, because there were no witnesses, right?
Correct.
So something happened to you, you're on the ground, there's a bull standing next to you and that sort of thing. How do you go about proving that the bull is responsible for her injuries?
Well, we have Robin's testimony, and she's credible, and we believe her. What else could it have been? We know the rancher. We know the rancher was given permission to graze cows and bulls in the area. And I believe that you were able to find, or you were able to observe the tag in the bull's ear at the time as well. You know, little by little, with testimony from various people, we're able to show that it was in fact a bull that caused this injury.
There were some kids on the top of the mountain. They thought they heard screaming, so they came back down, found me off the path in the grass.
And what did they do?
They pushed me a little, wake me up, asked if I was okay, and I can't recall a lot back then except I wanted to get out of there. I was in incredible pain.
These kids, did they testify in court? No.
No, Robin's case we settled at mediation, so they didn't testify.
Okay, you went to mediation, why, rather than going to court?
We went to mediation because we're always open to settlement, and trial for some people can be emotionally taxing, of course, and we must listen to our clients, but at the time, it's also an opportunity to find out what the other side's arguments are going to be and what they will present at trial.
There was a rancher that owned this bull, and he was one of the defendants. The Park District was the other. Park District sounds to me like deep pockets, right? So what is the relationship now with some of these ranchers and public lands? Does the Park District say to the rancher, hey, anything that happens, man, you have to indemnify us? Is that what's going on now?
Yes, that's right, and that's what we discovered. There's an indemnification agreement in place. So before a rancher is given permission to allow their cattle to graze freely in the parkland, they have to agree to defend and indemnify in the event one of their bovines injures someone. because evidently both of them know it, that this is something that can certainly happen.
What is the minimal amount of insurance that the ranchers have to carry for indemnification?
In our case, I believe the minimum was $1 million.
Is that for 1 year?
I think it depends on the terms of the contract. It has to be renewed.
Okay. What did you find in this case versus some of your other cases that was unique about this case?
In this case, one thing that we discovered was that this particular bull had been allowed to roam freely during breeding season, but that the rancher was supposed to remove it after the breeding season was over, and yet failed to do so because he simply couldn't find the bull. We also learned that during breeding season, these breeding cattle are allowed to roam freely among people, which is dangerous, as we've talked about before, because of hormones, because of other various things. Incidents such like this can happen. And the other thing that we learned is that these female cows are also allowed to roam freely when they're pregnant, and they can drop a calf anywhere, even on a trail. And female cows or mother cows are extremely protective of their calves, which can lead to injuries.
What do you think about the job that this law firm did for you?
Excellent. They were all excellent. Skip, especially Clarissa, and they were all great.
And you learned a lot about the legal business, didn't you?
Yes.
You don't go there anymore, do you?
Oh, no.
Well, I want to thank you very much for telling us your story, and congratulations. We have another case that we have the client, and I believe Jeff is going to be on the show, and the client is Alvina. It is my great pleasure to introduce Alvina Pereira and Jeff Walker again. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Jeff, tell our audience a little bit about this particular case.
Sure. Well, our client, Alvina Pereira, owned some horses, and as horses are wont to do, they need to eat. So Alvina went to a place in Half Moon Bay called Azevedo Feed Company to buy some hay for her horses. Azevedo Feed is basically a family-run operation, but it's not. It's a well-established business family within the community, and they had a feedlot that was basically a barn and a little payment shack, and off to the side of the payment shack was a corral where they kept a cow as a pet. This cow's name was Holly the cow. And the cow had been there for some time, and Alvina had met the cow before from a distance, had seen the cow in the corral, and thought it was perfectly friendly. But on this particular day when Alvina showed up to purchase her feed, there was the clerk there, was a young woman who was very excited because Holly the cow had just given birth to some calves, and had excitedly told Alvina about the calves and said, "Hey, they named one of these calves after me, actually. The baby calf's name is Heather. Do you want to go meet Heather the cow?" And Alvina, being a lover of animals and knowing that baby cows can be pretty cute, said, "Sure, why don't you take me out there and I'll meet the calves." So Heather, after Alvina paid for her feed, Heather led her around to the corral and opened the corral. And it gets a little bit fuzzy in terms of there are competing stories for what happened next, but the evidence seemed to show that at some point Heather crossed in front of Alvina while they were both in the corral, and Heather went up to scratch one of the baby calves on the neck and wasn't really paying attention. And Alvina was then left in this corral with a cow and her newborn calves. And this is a very large animal, and they're not designed to be pets. I mean, they're not naturally pets. They're inherently unpredictable animals as well. And this particular instance, it's not entirely clear what triggered the cow, but something angered Holly the cow, who targeted Alvina, lowered her head, and drove Alvina into the fence of the corral and continued to grind her the cow continued to grind her head against Elvina's torso, breaking almost all of her ribs. All while Heather, the clerk, was watching, and the owner of the feedlot was across the lot and came running out. And when the cow finally gave up on trying to do whatever the cow was trying to do, they pulled Elvina out, and instead of calling an ambulance, they took her and threw her in the truck of the owner.
Yeah, I got to stop you there, because when I read that, they threw you in the cab or the back of the truck.
They hoisted me up into the passenger side of my Ford 250 truck and said, "Get her out of here. No one's to know about this."
What was going through your head when the cow came at you?
First, the cow approached me very docilely, and I was scratching her head, and she was looking at me, you know, just focused at it, and I was like, wow, she's really massive. She's huge. And Heather goes, "Yeah, she's still nursing." And immediately I just knew something wasn't right. And the cow lowered her head down to my feet and let out a very large snort. And I knew at that point I was in danger. She then lifted her head up and started muzzle punching me in my chest. At that point I was shouting, oh my God, what is she doing?" And then dropped her head again and launched me.
And slammed you up against the side of the barn there, right?
So I fell on the backside of a pipe corral fencing, and she just came in and just shoved her head into my chest and never ever let go.
Yeah, how do you feel today, you know?
I'm in pain every day. This case has also affected me mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, I was figuring maybe you had some nightmares.
Severe PTSD to the point of acute. I underwent a 1.5 year weekly sessions of EMDR therapy.
What is that, EMDR?
It is an eye movement, repetitive. It's a modality that's given to usually Iraq veterans, ER nurses, public safety, firemen who've had severe trauma. And it was founded by a psychologist, and you're connected to, you can either do an eye movement. My therapist actually connected me to a machine that vibrates basically the right side of my brain and the left side of my brain when she's going through stripping me down from the incident and the accident and the trauma and rebuilding me back up. And it doesn't allow you to experience panic attacks during your sessions.
Do you still have panic attacks?
Bizarrely enough, I'm 8 years out on this case, and I have had 2 this year, which was pretty shocking.
This year you had a panic attack. What happened at that panic attack?
Felt closed in. At one point, she closed me in the attack, and I couldn't see even Heather.
Now you own horses still, right?
2 out of the 4 that I had. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how are you around the other animals now?
I'm more cautious even around my own horses, which it's not a good feeling. I always trusted my horses. I have not ridden in over 8 years since the accident. So it's, you know, when a dog approaches me, I'm more cautious. It's a shame.
Now, Jeff, this went to trial, is that right?
Yes, it went to trial in San Mateo County. Originally, the case had been against Azevedo Feed, the company, as well as the owner of the land, which was the Wilbur and Cecilia Azevedo Trust. During the litigation, we accepted a settlement offer from Azevedo Feed as a trial strategy. We believed that the Azevedo Feed attorneys were putting on a much stronger case than the trust was. The trust was sort of coattailing.
So you're going to use them?
Our thought was that they'd offered what we told our client was a pretty reasonable settlement to get the feed store out of it, but that did not include the landowners, who were the trustees of the trust, or specifically the trustee of the trust. So we proceeded to trial against the trustees of the Wilbur and Cecilia Azevedo Trust on a premises liability case. We took that all the way through to a jury verdict, and the jury awarded us about $2.4 million in their verdict.
But that's not including what you settled with the feed.
That's correct. Immediately after we got the verdict, the defense attorney moved for what's called a J&OV, basically asking the judge to overturn the verdict. And his argument was that the feedlot who had already settled out was the only responsible party, and it wasn't the landowners. The judge, in fact, was persuaded by that argument and ordered a new trial. And as we prepared to take the case back to trial, that we once again settled, this time with the landowners, and that completed the case.
Anything to delay justice, right?
Sometimes it feels that way, certainly.
Let me ask you this question. You know, how long did this case go on, by the way?
It was 3 years before I went to trial.
What was your opinion of how the justice system works?
Well, for me, I fought hard because had that been a child, they would have died. And that fence was opened where she was. And I think with my law firm teams, Bohr Saffron and Walker, they represented me very well. And the closing argument was amazing, that I feel justice has been served.
And so your opinion of the Walker firm is?
Highly recommend them.
Well, congratulations on the case. And let that be a warning to others out there, right? That they're responsible, aren't they? People
that own cows, just like people that own any other dangerous property, dangerous personal property, they have to be careful about what that does to other people. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking your time to come here, and congratulations on the case.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.